my mate was 18, and we found this jazz club called Studio 51, 51 being the year, it was open that year.
Okay.
And so I found modern jazz.
Right.
Previously I'd quite enjoyed Frank Sinatra and swing bands, big bands, stuff like that. But and then now I'm interested in, introduced to modern jazz, bebop and stuff like that, and I thought it was terrific. So we started going to this place, and it was one of those places you get out very late, and sometimes we never had no money. We had to walk home all the way to Hainault from Leicester Square. That would be on a Saturday night.
Right.
It'd be Sunday morning before we got
Right.
in, got home.
Yeah.
Sunday morning, well into Sunday morning.
Wow.
And it was a new world. And then I found Soho,
Right.
and I was 16. I'd go up there on my own.
Oh, would you?
I just loved it. I loved the fact it was cosmopolitan,
Right.
and it was like different, you know.
Yeah.
It was different to anything that I'd experienced,
Yeah.
Because we used to go dancing and stuff like that. And on the estate, we used to go, they used to have dances at the youth club and stuff like that. So we knew a bit about country music. I used to follow that, and I still love country music. And so I was always into music, new experiences. And my pal who I was lots of friends in Hainault, we used to go out, get loads of us used to go. We used to meet down the pub, the local pub, and we'd meet down there, and we'd say, where are we going this week? We'd always be looking to try new stuff. We went there last week, don't want to go there again. Go up here and go up there. So we'd be trying out new stuff all the time. And then of course the Teddy Boy era came. We were all after getting the clothes and the music, the clothes, everything, you know. So
you had money to be able to buy those things then?
Well, we saved it up. Obviously it was a lot cheaper then than that is now.
Yeah.
You could get a suit for 21 quid.
Yeah.
Or you could get a suit for a fiver in the 50 shillings at one time, in the 50 shilling tailors.
Yeah.
But no, if you wanted a decent one, you could have it made in a good tailor's, and you could get a suit for 21 quid. You didn't earn that much. I mean, when I first went to work, I think at 16, my money was £3.50 a week.
Right. Okay.
And I didn't tell you I was the paper boy, and I delivered all round locally, and quite a nice. Yeah.
So did politics encroach on your life then? That's all.
No, I was always rebellious. I was rebellious at school, got myself in all sorts of scrapes there, and then having left school and started going to work and everything, and as I got older, could you repeat the question?
Did politics encroach on your life?
Oh yeah. So the first time I got any inkling of politics, I was working on the building. I was working. I got a job on a little family firm, and at the time, this would be maybe late 50s, mid-50s, I'd gone in the army before that. I'd gone in 18. I'd worked in a factory a local factory to Hainault's estate, a rubber factory. Hated it, but at that time you couldn't leave. I was 17, and if you left, no one wanted to employ you because they knew you was going in the army. You was being pulled up at 18, so no, you're no good to me. So you had to, if you had a job, you had to stick hold of it. And I used to go in there, and I was working with the men, doing exactly what the men were doing on the mill, the dirtiest job in a rubber factory. like there's all this raw rubber going around rollers, being broken up and heated up by the rollers,
Right.
and then you pour chemicals on them until you make the raw rubber into this kind of solution that then puts in moulds and then pressed and then come out, you know, the finished rubber item, whatever it is they're making. And so, and it was staffed by a lot of some of this, not all of it. No, I would say a decent percentage of the staff were Ukrainian, Polish, that sort of Eastern European, who had escaped, who got away, perhaps, I don't know, during the war or perhaps after the war, I'm not certain. But they were very, very anti-union, unfortunately, they were. And so there was no chance. They'd do. This firm had come from West London and moved down to Hainault, and so there was no chance of building a union. And I was only 17, and you know I was too busy thinking about dancing and music and stuff. And so, but my dad has always been sort of taught politics. In our family, we always talked politics. My aunt was a bit of a Tory, so when they came round, it was like sparks would fly, and I'd inevitably get involved in it. I was only a little kid. I'd start, you know, I'd have my say. But anyway, but that was as far as it went. Getting involved in a political party wasn't part of the plan. But there, so I went in the army. That was an experience in itself, the way I performed in the army, you know. I was probably the worst soldier there was, because I wouldn't soldier, so to speak. I wouldn't, you know, I found it very difficult in the army to the way it was. It's, you know, if the city firm that I worked in was structured, well, the army is totally structured, you know, into platoons and officers, and there's a hierarchy, and you are the squaddy at the bottom of the hierarchy, and I've got myself in all sorts of problems there with. I remember I made friends with, because in the end I worked in the army in this camp that had up in the Midlands that had used to develop weapons, and officers would come from different armies to buy these or view the weapons and then make a decision whether they're going to buy them or not. I remember once they said to me, "This officer's coming. Could you prepare his room and all the rest of it?" So I did that, and anyway, he's come here from Iraq. He was an Iraqi officer. This is before Saddam, and he. So I lit his fire and prepared his room, and eventually we got quite friendly. It turns out he was obviously anti-colonialist, right? So he didn't like the British officers much. He didn't socialise them while the time he was there. But he was important because he was going to buy stuff. So me and him he said, you know, one of the first things he said, that bloody blanket, you got this, I wouldn't put it on my camel. We was having a little laugh about that. And then we got right friendly, got talking, and then he used to have his radio and he'd play Arab music, switch in to perhaps Baghdad, I don't know. And I'd listen to Arab music, I found it very interesting, We'd chat away. Anyway, I got called in before the officers and I was told, you're fraternising with an officer, you're a squaddy, you don't fraternise with anyone, you will not go and see that bloke again, right? He's here to do a job, he's going to do his job, and you have been told to look after him, but you're not his friend, you will not see him again, right? So that was that. So I never ever knew what that. That's the kind of atmosphere I felt really oppressed by. I didn't like it. And
so when he was his antagonism towards colonialism, when he was describing that, did that mean anything to you? Did you pick up on that?
Well, only insofar as my dad working in the docks had seen all sorts of different crews and that, and he was quite open about people. Once he told me he saw an officer on a British ship knocking an Indian, or from the Indian Republic or whatever, clumping him, and he said, stopped him doing it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So only insofar as that, that was. Well, there was no prejudice, I don't think, in our family. You know what I mean? In that way, we've always been quite open to.
Was that against the stream of living in the East End at the time? If your family carried no prejudice, but I should imagine there was quite a lot of racism around.
Hoxton was notorious as being a place that supported Mosley in the 30s, Very rough place. They kind of probably recruited ruffians out of it. It was also a place where the Titanic gang was formed. You probably don't know them. They ended up getting very rich in Britain and quite high up. And my dad used to tell me about them, and I've just recently bought a book on that. But anyway, that was the sort of area and surrounding, and there was but I mean, my pal, he had an older brother. He was just a bit younger than me, and I'd be around about 11, and his brother, who was 18, gave me a copy of Mein Kampf and said, go and read that. So he was obviously a young fascist, right? Yeah. I didn't know basically what he was talking about at the time,
And what happened about that then?
Well, I didn't read his book, but the other side of it was there was a street called Essex Street. Now it was notorious in Hoxton, So even within a rough area, there's an even rougher area.
Right.
And that street, I just described Hoxton. You couldn't go walking around the streets because immediately all the kids that lived in that street, if you was a kid, they would start on you as soon as you walked in the street. There was all sorts of gangs on where you lived, right? You was in this gang, and they were in that. This is just a small area, and you only meet at school, and then if you have a fallout at school, you say, "I'll get my gang," and you'd arrange a meet on the debris somewhere, and you'd all throw bricks at one another, and stuff like that, So, and it was, but within that, not Crondall Street, what was it called? Oh, anyway, it doesn't matter which name, the name of the street. There was this family in the street, lived in the street, and there were 5 brothers, and they were all black, and they were known as, at the time I lived there, as being very, very rough. You didn't mess about with them. Do you know what I mean? So, although it had fascism, I suppose if you was black and you lived in that area, then you had to be bloody tough, to survive. And I mean, I used to go and visit from Hainault after the war, because it was when I first lived at Hainault, I'd go up to Hoxton every week and stay with my mate, and I can remember going down there once. Perhaps I hadn't been round here for some time. and I went down there, and I don't know, was it a church or a club or something had burnt down, a building. I said, what happened to there? I went, oh, the kids burnt it down. But that was how it was, you know. You see kids climbing on roofs everywhere, you know. It was just, and you'd walk along the road, and all the little kids would say, let's threaten you, and start threatening you with stones, and we're going to, do you know what I mean? And I can remember E. MacDonald Bailey, you probably don't. He was an Olympic runner.
Right, yes, I've heard, yes, yeah, heard of it.
Well, he lived in Oxton,
right.
And he had his wife was mentally ill, and it was such a horrible, you know. I'm describing it. There were some good things about it, but there was a horrible side, a vicious, nasty side to it, which his wife or his partner, she would get followed by kids chanting and then throwing stones at her and things like that because she was mentally ill and she was off her head a little bit, you know. Really sad things, you know. It could kind of be nasty. On the other hand, people could be very, very close and good to one another, you know.
Okay.
But where were we?
I just wanted to ask another question about your dad, really. That so you said he was very like an open kind of person.
Yeah, he was open to things. Yeah.
I mean, was he a Labour Party man? Was he,
No.
organised politics?
My dad said to me, never join the Labour Party. They're absolutely bloody useless. And to be honest, I've understood exactly what he meant over the years, you know. They're such a disappointment. It'll never be any different because, you know, I've learned. I mean, he said the only one was, what's his name, the mayor of Poplar, what's his name?
Yeah, Lansbury.
Lansbury.
Yeah.
He said at least he did a bit of bird, went in jail, and he, you know, wouldn't, you know, defied the government, defied the state. He was the only one in them who had any balls at all. The rest of them are, you know, they. I mean, I'll give you an example. Anura Bevan. You know, he was noted for introducing the health service and all that. I think he was bisexual, but he was certainly gay. Nothing wrong with that, you know. I'm open as anything to whatever anybody's sexuality is. But he spoke with passion and an ability to. He had an orator's ability, if you like. But at the end of the day, what did he do when he was offered the Foreign Secretary's job? You know, he was an anti-nuclear person, right? And suddenly he dumps that because he's Foreign Secretary. He says, "Don't send me naked into the
conference chamber."
Yeah, the conference chamber. And do you know what I mean? To sell your principles seems to me an indication of the lack of depth in you. And it's not just him. I mean, the left followed the Bevanites, you know, and then they were disappointed. Then came along Ben, and then they were disappointed. Well, they lost. To be fair to Ben, he at least didn't change at that time. But and now we've been through Jeremy Corbyn, who seems a very nice chap, very obstinate. One of his features is his obstinacy. Otherwise, you'd have caved in years ago. But under the pressure they put on him, but his own side turned on him. They'd rather have the Tories in than the bloody Labour Party and run by the left. So there's no space for the left in the Labour Party, and there's no room for change. This reform is not. How can you reform a society when the economy is collapsing? I know it's 12 years of Tory rule, but it was it was built in the beginning. Not, of course, there was Thatcher, but then came the Blair government. and then Gordon Brown as Chancellor. Who introduced PPI? You know, our hospitals are now. The Tories can claim quite rightly they're putting more money at the hospitals, but of course more money in a system where the value of money is constantly falling can mean a different thing altogether. More money in labour may not be more money, but in any event, PPI, it mortgaged our hospital system, it introduced private investment into the health service on a scale which now you can imagine. I mean, I recently had my eyes done, and then, you know, I'm talking about the cataracts in the private sector. Now, it was done very nicely. I've got no complaints about how it was done. It was wonderful. And compared with the health service itself, I noticed when I went back to the health service how crowded the nurses are all rushing about, how, you know, how less than relaxed it was compared with the private sector. So the public sector, I mean, the private sector comes out of the public sector account. So the Tories might be putting more money in, but it's going to the private sector. That's the contract, and that's the contract perpetrated by one Gordon Brown, who don't stop writing in the Garden of the way forward. It's not the way forward. It's going backwards. We're not even heading back to the 30s. It looks like we're heading back to Victorian bloody times, the way it's going. Because I said to the striking CWU workers, and when they described what the list of demands are, I said, if you don't win this strike, you won't be on an enhanced pay scale, you will be going towards Amazon. They're not coming towards you, you're going back to apply, and you can imagine the kind of skates you've got to put on inside your industry under that sort of pressure. The working class are going backwards, and part of the responsibility lies with Labour. And so we've got to do, you know, for me, we've got to get out of Labour and build something different.
So was your dad, was he a communist then? Did he join the Communist Party?
No, he never joined the Communist Party. I did. He, for whatever reason, he never joined anything in that way, although he was sort of a bloke, if he gets a bee in his bonnet, like for example, when they were going to build the dual carriageway on Romford Road, my dad campaigned to get a crossing over the road so kids could cross over to the Hainault Forest, and went round collecting signatures, making himself a nuisance, you know, in order to get this thing built. And so, but he wasn't he might have thought like a communist, but he didn't, for some reason he didn't join the communists. Probably he understood a bit more than me, the nature of perhaps Stalinism or something. It didn't quite appeal to him so much, you know, which I was only later to find out about, you know.
Okay, so you came out of the army then, your national service finished, is that right?
Went on the building, got any job, wore my old army gear to go on the building with, dirtied it all up, you know. It was kind of...
Was that deliberate?
Yeah, part of the revenge on the army.
Oh, right.
And then I'll give you an instance in the army, which was kind of amusing. I got a compassionate posting into London, but it was on the other side of London from Hainault. So I could have lived out, but I didn't fancy that, you know, getting up that early and getting in to get back in time. So I stayed in camp. It was because my mother was mentally ill, and I was, you know, able to see her. But in any event, so there's going to be a 36-hour pass. So you put in for a 36-hour pass in the camp, and so suddenly they said to me, "No, you're required for a skeleton crew, but you can go the following week. Okay, fair enough. I was quite happy with that. Comes the following week, the sergeant major, when I applied into the company office for a pass to go, I was refused the pass. I said, but I was told last week that if I worked that week, I would get a, well, you're not. So I said, well, I want to see the adjutant. That's the captain.
Right.
Oh, he said, well, you can't see the adjutant. Why is that? Well, you can't. You just bugger off. I've told you what. Get out of it. I thought, well, I'm not putting up with that. So as I went outside, I could see two officers speaking. One was the religious officer, the vicar.
Oh, okay.
No, I waited. They were talking. I waited, and then eventually they stopped. And he said to me, I went, "Excuse me, sir." He went, "Yeah." I said, "Could I have a word?" And I explained to him what had happened. He said, "Well, go and see the adjutant." I said, "Well, he's told me I can't." He said, "Leave it to me." He said. No, he went to see the adjutant. So suddenly, he said to me, "In the meantime, you go outside the adjutant's door." Right? Now the adjutant's door was right next to the company office. They had to join in. So I'm standing outside the adjutant's office. The sergeant major comes out and says, "I thought I told you you're not." I said, "Well, I'm seeing him." Anyway, he picked up the phone, the adjutant, told him to come in, and then he's called me in. And he asked me what the problem was, etc. By this time, the vicar had gone. And so I told him. He said, "Is this you, Sergeant Major?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Listen, in future," this is the adjutant speaking, "in future, if this occurs, you come straight to me. You don't, I find it kind of embarrassing that you've had to go to this officer." So he said, "Right, you're on your weekend pass. Away you go." So as I'm going out the office, I could hear him giving the sergeant major a dressing down. Right. So I've gone back to my job. A little while later, he showed up. Oh, he said, "You think you're being clever, eh?" We'll see about that. And he was always trying to get me on your charges after that,
Right.
And then the day I went out, him, another sergeant who I didn't particularly like, they came up to me and I was going, I'm leaving. I told them, "Fuck off out of it, the pair of you, fucking hate you, and I'm going." So that was my feeling about the army. I'm not a person who wants. I'm a free subject not a subject, a free citizen. I'm not a subject. I'm not anyone's. I'm not going to have anyone tell me what I've got to do unless it makes sense. So that was that. So that to getting back to what was the question.
So when did you go into the docking? When was that?
Well, I had several different jobs. I went into the building first of all, as I say. On one of the jobs I went on the building, I got there the first day I'm working there, and we're digging this trench. This is before they had diggers and all that. And so we're digging this trench, big trench. And a bloke said, one of them said, I just started that morning. One of them said, "Well, have you noticed they sack 2 people in here every week? So every Friday the foreman comes along and tells 2 of them you're sacked if they ain't, you know what I mean? So he said, what I propose is when he comes this Friday, if he says 2 are sacked, he said we all go, right, that's it, give me my cards and we'll leave him in the shit." Now there was plenty of work about at the time. So I thought, well, yeah, that makes sense. I've only just got there, right? Anyway, comes the Friday, as he said, the foreman came round. We're all sitting there having a cup of tea, Foreman comes round and said, so, you get your cars tonight. We no longer need you. I said, well, you might as well get mine then, if you're getting theirs. Stuck my hand up, right. It was all quiet. No one said anything. Just us three went. And on another job, he said, go on. I was working on a shop, building shops. And he said to me, go and help that lorry driver because they're clearing the site from debris and rubble, what they don't want. So there's several, they're running a lot of lorries to get, and he's anxious to get it cleared. And I went over to help the lorry driver to load his lorry, shoveling it. The lorry driver said to me, slow down. He said, it's getting late. He said he wants me to go and get another load, or take one, come back and get another load. He said, but I ain't having it. So slow down, I don't want it, So I slowed down. So the lorry drivers took his load. Then the foreman came up and he said, you're sacked. He said, you don't work hard enough.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they weren't unionised places then that you were working there, those building sites?
Well, I wasn't, there wasn't all, some of them was in the union, I suppose different trades. I was just a labourer.
Right.
And I suppose there must have been some in the union, but I was never asked to join.
You weren't sort of particularly union minded at that time? No.
But then I was on this other building job. It was a family firm, and it was I picked the job up, I was supposed to get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, I got there at 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock. I don't know how I had the balls to go up there at 11 o'clock, Anyway, I got there, and the general foreman, he said to me, he said, go on, he said, go on, he said, we all make a mistake, go on. And he was quite a nice bloke. Anyway, so it was nice, and the people who worked there were very nice. One of the blokes had been a commando during the war, he'd been, gone out to Yugoslavia as a commando, and got shot up. I think it was about 200 of them went, and it was only him and another bloke found alive. They'd all been killed, and he said he spent the rest of the time fighting with the partisans in bloody Yugoslavia. So there was that. So it was a family firm, and they had family. He had his dad working there and stuff like that. And then one day, there was a Jewish fella. I've never seen a Jewish fella on the building, but he was there, And he was a right nice bloke. And in a way, he was the first political bloke I ever met, who influenced me in a way as a politico, because he gave me first, but it was a book by Michael Foot about the rearmament, I forget, or the failure of the tourists to rearm before the war. Anyway, but what I liked about him, we worked in this mental hospital. My mum was in that mental hospital. Oh, right. And he was very kind to the patients. He gave them fags, spoke to them civilly, kindly. Really, I felt, this bloke's a real nice bloke, right I mean? And he was a very proud bloke. He always cleaned all his tools, and but he wouldn't take no shit from nobody. We worked in this little family firm, and I'll tell you what they was like. They owned properties in Woodford Bridge, houses that they owned but were on fixed rents. They were fixed during the war, and they were fixed remaining after the war. And they used to talk, and I overheard them, and they used to say, I'll be glad when they fuckers die and we can have the flats. Because once the tenant went, the fixed rent died with them, and they could put people in there and charge them a higher rent. So, and since this was their attitude. So, anyway, they sacked all these people, most of them worked there, man and boy, and they sacked everything, and including the commando, his dad, everyone, except me. And they said, we've got another job coming back, but you can, we're doing up those houses, those same houses, because they have to keep them in good repair. and go and work round there, and then we'll make you, you'll end up being a foreman, and this, that and the other, right? So, anyway, I'm the only bloke left, and I'm painting the gutterings and stuff up there. And the old uncle who was part of the firm, it was owned by two brothers, and one of the brothers had his boys working in it. But they were petty bourgeois types, you know. Didn't want to pay nothing, you know, they could help it, and tight bastards. Anyway, he's watching everything I'm doing. In the end, I went, listen, give me my cards. I ain't having someone standing here watching me all bloody day. No, I'm fed up with it, give me it. So I got out of that. So then I worked on the railways and the railway workshops. I worked as a blacksmith striker in the railway. And the blacksmith was a pest, you know. He said to me, "Oh, you're not allowed to put your foot on the I forgot what they call it now. The thing, the shaping thing, the big."
All right. The anvil, is it?
The anvil, yeah. No, only the blacksmith. I said, "Oh, fucking blacksmith." We was heating up these bands that go round, steel bands that go round wheels and that, and in order to put them back on wheels, repair and refurbish and everything, and you had to that had to be dipped in water and stuff like that, and you had to get in the water. And I said, "Well, where's my rubber boots then?" I ain't got no rubber. Well, I ain't getting in there. You don't think I'm getting in there, do you? You know, sort of protective clothing. And so, you know, in the end, I said, I'm not having this. You know, that was, I went from job to job like that. And
what decade was that?
The one job I worked with was in a steel foundry. An iron foundry, not a steel foundry. It was called Wilmer Lees, and it was in Bow, near the Bow flyover. I only worked there a few days. I remember the money I was getting, 4 and 6pence halfpenny an hour. 4 and 6pence halfpenny an hour. Shit money. And I was on what they call knockout, where the stuff's all been moulded, and then they put it on this air thing that blows off all the moulding, so it's like a cloud of mould going up, and you've got these long caliper type things that you have to pick whatever's been done, and you know, and till it cools down, and pick it up. And so all this shit's flying up. You've got a hanky over your face, no protective clothing and everything. And I'm working with some black guys who just died. You know, like it was just the post-war period where black people were coming into the country. And I'm working with some Maltese.
All right, okay.
And I stood it for, less than a week.
Yeah.
And I said to them, I said, what are you doing here? You know, I mean, there was plenty of work about. I said, what are you doing here? I ain't having this. 4 and 2pence here. Anyway, I said, well, we can't get a job anywhere else. So I said, well, I'm not hanging around, I'm telling you, I'm fucking had enough of this. It was really heavy work, heavy, hot work, with baking and filthy, rotten work, you know what I mean? It was terrible work. So I didn't last.
When was that, Ed? Do you know?
When?
When? Do you remember? What decade?
Well, I went in, it was in the 50s.
Oh, 50s, okay.
Yeah, that was in the 50s. And then I ended up, getting a job in what was then Briggs Motor Bodies, which then was taken over by Briggs. But they made the bodies for Ford cars. And it was known at the time as a very, very well organised trade union, Briggs itself.
Okay.
They was always having issues there. And there was a bloke remember his name now. The bell ringer. You know, used to ring the bell when I was out on strike. Yeah, ring, signal, all put tools down. And so I worked there.
Did you join the union there?
Pardon?
Did you join the union?
Yeah. I was already in the union.
Right.
I put my name down for the dock. I was in the, and besides, when I was on the railway, I was in the railway union as well. So I actually was in 2 unions at one time, both, you know, paying dues in the because I wanted to get in the dock with my dad by that time, and you had to be nominated. You had to go to the dock branch. Right. My dad had nominated me, then someone else was second, and I was accepted. And then you had to wait until there was an opening, and I waited 5 years.
Did you?
Yeah. So as I say, back to Ford's. Oh, this is really my first introduction. Oh, prior to that, I'd gone into the rubber factory again after coming out of the army. You know, gone into the rubber factory. It was my first strike. I was 21, and I'd just gone there for a cut. I thought myself, it tied me over. I didn't like the place, but I was looking for a couple of bob in between jobs, sort of thing. So I thought I'll work there for a couple of weeks, and then I'll go and work, find another job. Anyway, first morning I turn up to go to work, they're on strike. And this is the thing that happened. In the meantime, while I'd been away in the army, 2 years and everything, a lot of Asian or Indian, people from India, had gone to work there. And I didn't know at the time, but it turns out they were all part of Indian Workers Association. So they were highly political. And they'd gone in there, and they're straight away there, boom, they're on the job for a union. Which was a marked contrast, if you like, from the Eastern Europeans. I mean, on reflection, some of those Eastern Europeans, I don't know. I mean, it could have been. I mean, some Ukrainians I know fought on the side of Hitler. So you know, many of them could have been. And they were certainly for the boss and anti-union. So it could have been, as far as I know, they could have been bloody Nazis for all I know. But in any event, the Indian workers came over and organised, and I was so surprised. And in the end, the job, I didn't care about the job. You know, it was winning the strike, and they did get union recognition. So that was great. That was really good. And
was that a formative moment for you?
Yeah, it was. It was a kind of a revolution, because by stopping. I'd always been one to say, I ain't going to do this, but if everybody does it, obviously it's much more powerful, isn't it? And so from being sort of like a rebel without a cause, now I'm a rebel with a cause. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of, and then of course I'll get a job in Briggs's, and it is a well organised place. The Communist Party is there in some powerful sense as well. So it's highly political. Now, I'd see them. I used to go there and travel up with about 4 other guys in a car. One would be driving their car, and we'd all put a bit of money in for the petrol, so we could all share. And we'd go to work, and then we'd see the Communist Party outside the factory, giving out leaflets, selling their paper. And like the conversation in the car, none of them were political. Well, the driver was, a bloke called Freddie Ferguson. And he's, you know, they say to them, well, I'm not a communist, but you've got to admire them. They're out there, you know, putting themselves about in their own time, and you know, so they are keen activists. So there was a kind of a sort of guarded admiration for them, if you like. I'll just go to the toilet.
Yeah, okay. Pause it for a second.